Hello lovely humans, welcome to my September wrap-up where we talk about all the books I have read in September. This is going to be an attempt at a super speedy wrap-up, which I'm getting worse and worse at, but basically I throw books myself, I talk kind of fast, and I just tell you a couple of highlights about what I liked. I log this all on my core pile so I can read you what I rated each book and just go over my thoughts and feelings, and yeah, then just throw the next book at myself basically. So without further ado, I cannot throw this first book because it was an audiobook, but picture here. So this was The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell, and I loved this. This is a thriller about a girl that's gone missing and her mum is absolutely determined to find her, and it goes on between two different time periods. One in which we follow the girl up until the point she goes missing, and one in which we are seeing like a year and a bit, 2 years later, when the investigation has kind of been opened back up again for various different reasons, and I just loved it. It was so full of suspense, it was such a good audiobook, I couldn't put it down, the narrator was fantastic, and it got 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nagan. This was something that I thought would be very different to what it was. This really focused around a group of girls who had become paper girls in this society in which the paper girls are basically there as concubines to the king, and they are chosen and then they kind of go on to live lives after their year of being the king's concubine, but kind of still serving the rich people of the kingdom. And this followed one specific character who didn't want this to be the thing, and like kind of wouldn't accept that this was the norm and wanted to kind of overthrow what was happening. Honestly, I was disappointed by this one. I kind of thought it would be a little bit punchier than it was. It had some really good themes of feminism, and it really highlighted toxic masculinity and what all the problems here was, and definitely talked a lot about sexual abuse. And in that sense, I thought it was very good, but in terms of actually keeping me interested and having a varied plot, it let me down a little bit. The atmosphere was really great, the plot just was not there for me, and it was very slow. I just think it could have done with a little bit more high stakes moments that were like real pivotal points. It didn't feel like it had enough of those for my liking personally, so I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Crystal Storm by Morgan Rhodes. This is the 5th book in the Fallen Kingdom series, which is kind of Game of Thronesy. It's like 2 warring kingdoms that basically cause a massive mess. There's magic, except there's not meant to be any magic, and that's kind of a source of power that people are searching for. And this is the 5th book. So we've really seen our characters come quite a long way in this book, and this is really leading towards the 6th and final book in the series. And I really enjoyed it, although I think I needed to read these all a little bit closer together because there's so much going on that it's quite easy to forget what was happening in the previous books. But I can't really tell you much about this one because, one, it would be spoiling all 4 before it, and 2, this one kind of blurs in my brain with the 6th one because I read them kind of close together, so they're kind of one book for me, but I definitely really enjoyed it. This has got lots of epic moments, brilliant characters, brilliant writing, and just a great fantasy, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Triforce Need Not Apply by Camilla Bruce. This is a historical fiction that is based on a true story about a woman who basically decided that she was going to kind of pave the way for herself as a woman. She wasn't going to follow society's norms, and in fact any men that stood in her way, she was just going to kill them. So she was a serial killer, and this is her story. It was very interesting. It was definitely out of my reading comfort zone, but I really wanted to read this because it's a very twisted version of feminism and really goes to the extreme in that she's a serial killer, and obviously there are many other ways to deal with equality issues, and she just goes on a killing spree. And yeah, it was fascinating to read about and very interesting to see the kind of cultural shift, because our main character has actually come to America from Norway. So we're seeing a cultural shift for her, and also seeing like a shift in her own life really, and the fact that she gets her individuality and she is able to be independent, but is also tied down by society's pressures and expectations, and that really weighs heavily in this and is influencing the kind of decisions that she makes to do the things that she does. I did pick the audiobook up for like the last 100 or so pages of this because whilst it was filled with a lot of high stakes moments, it did feel like it was slower paced, so I did need a little bit of a push along with the end, but I did really enjoy it and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin, and wow, this book disappointed me. This follows witches who are seasonal witches, so they have certain powers and their powers are active during certain seasons. We follow the main character who, I think, is it called an Ever Witch? I can't remember what the term for it is, but she's basically all seasons, and like that's not very common that comes around, so she has this ability to be able to control all seasons, but she's really struggling to get a handle on it at the same time that the earth is essentially falling apart. Climate change is a thing. This definitely highlights environmental issues with our planet in the sense of being a fantasy, but like also tying into issues that we see now, but just kind of adding a fantasy element to them. So it was really interesting from that perspective, but it was literally just repeating the same stuff constantly. It was really boring. Like every single dramatic event was just the same thing repeated, changing out the character that might have been there, the setting, the season, and it just felt like it was regurgitating its own plot. I didn't really care about the characters, I didn't care about the romance that was kind of being trailed along throughout the story. I just didn't care about any of it, and because it was so repetitive I just found it really boring. And like this could have done so much talking about the environment and how we can get involved with that, and it did touch on it, but it just didn't hone it in enough for me personally. So unfortunately I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. Then I read Immortal Ray by Morgan Rhodes, which is the 6th and final book in the Fallen Kingdom series. I absolutely loved this series, but I am so proud of myself for finishing it because this is a long high fantasy series and I have been reading it for just over a year, which I feel like is not too bad. I think I could have read it a little bit closer together to keep up with the characters a little bit, but I am so proud of myself for finishing it. I've already talked about Crystal Storm and what I liked about that one, and it's very similar with this one. We see such good character development in these books. From where we first see the characters to where we then see them in this book is such a journey. Like they really have changed and adapted. I've changed the characters I like for best, changed the characters I'm rooting for, and yeah, it's just so good. It has some great romances in it. The magic system is really interesting. The last 100 pages were just so epic and would make a great film, like the whole series would. And I just absolutely loved it. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I just adored it. I don't know why it's not 5 stars. It probably should be. It was just excellent, excellent. I would just please everyone go read this series. It's called the Fallen Kingdom series. It's really good, and I am sad to no longer be in that world. Then I read Lore by Alexandra Bracken. This is a Greek mythology inspired modern day fantasy in which Greek gods are kind of sent down to Earth as mortals for 7 days every 7 years or something like that, and they're basically made immortal and people can kill them, and if you kill them you take on the power of the Greek god, which is a really interesting concept. However, this book had so much going on that it was very hard to stay on track with what it was actually talking about. Like there was so much happening and so much information in there that I just felt daunted for a lot of this book, if I'm honest. I think it was really interesting, the idea that the gods will essentially just change constantly because someone has killed them and taken on their power, but there was quite a lot of different pivotal points here that it was hard to stay on track with which one was actually the current mission. The characters were okay, but I felt like kind of fell into the typical YA bracket of characters. Like I think you could easily lift these characters out and just switch them with the characters from the Mortal Instruments and it would be no different. Like that's kind of, they follow that set type of character base. I did enjoy this though, and I liked the fact that it gave us a little bit more than what I've read in previous Greek myth inspired or retelling stories, but ultimately it just left me a bit confused, to be honest. And I don't know if this is going to be a series, but if it is, I'm not going to continue with it. I think this one is enough for me. This is the really lovely Fairy edition though, which I do really like seeing on my shelves. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Single Thread of Moonlight by Laura Wood, and oh my gosh, I loved it so much. This is probably one of my favourite books of the year, definitely my favourite book of the month. I just absolutely adored it. This is a historical romance and Laura Wood just paints such brilliant worlds, but this is kind of a Cinderella retelling in which our main character runs away from home when her dad dies and her stepmom is just not a nice person, and then she has to come back to that home many years later as an adult for various different other reasons, but she's going there with a disguise kind of thing. They don't know who she is. She's going for completely different reasons and just kind of gets swept up in the life she could have had. This is such a good romance. I loved it. I really loved that this didn't fall down typical plot points for this kind of genre. It just felt really unique and refreshing, especially for a retelling. It just felt different. There was something about it that just was so good, and the way that Laura Wood writes her settings, you could just easily fall into that. Like, every book I've read of hers, I can still see the setting in my head, and this is no different. Truly spectacular, brilliant writing. I think this comes out October 5th, I want to say, so this was an early copy sent to me by the publishers, and I'm so glad I was able to read it before release day because I loved it. So go and pre-order this if you haven't already. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Fantastic. And the final book I'm going to be wrapping up, I'm kind of cheating here because at the time of filming this, I literally have like 20 pages left of this book, but I'm going to have finished it really soon. I'm actually listening to this one as an audiobook as well as reading alongside. This is Stardust by Neil Gaiman. I don't know what I'm going to rate this yet, but I think it's going to be either a 3 or a 4 star. If you've watched the film, you'll know what this is about, but it's set in a world where we've got like this wall division between the world we know in Victorian England and a fantasy world where there is so many different types of magic systems going on and just brilliant creative things happening, as Neil Gaiman does tend to write. And our main character Tristan has been told by the woman that he loves if he finds her a fallen star, she will marry him. So he goes on this quest to find this fallen star, and other people are also after this star, and this is the kind of high stakes journey we're going on to see who can get the star first and what is gonna happen. So I'm really enjoying what I've read so far of this. As I said, I've literally got like barely anything left, like half an hour in the audiobook, so I will definitely finish this really, really soon. So I think it's safe to say I have enjoyed this. I was hesitant because I've watched the film and it does very closely follow the film, so I thought that would remove the intrigue for me because I know what's gonna happen. However, I'm still really liking it and the intrigue is absolutely still there. So I'm quite glad I picked this one up. It's super short, so it's been a nice little read to round off the month with, but I'm pretty sure, as I said, yeah, either 3.5 to 4 stars, I would say, which genuinely has surprised me. I think that is credit to the audiobook because it's narrated by Neil Gaiman, and I think he is such a good narrator, but narrating his own stories is just fantastic because you can really bring it to life in the way you imagined it when writing it, so I think that definitely aids this book. So this is the final book I've read of the month of September. So I read 9 books in September, which I feel like is fairly decent. I'm trying to slow it down a little bit because my wrap-ups were getting a little out of control and I was just reading so much that I was forgetting what I was reading. However, my October TBR is massive, so that's probably all gonna go out the window when it comes time for my October TBR to come out. So yeah, I have really been enjoying the books I've been reading. I feel like I've had a decent month of like mixed reading. I've read some books that I absolutely adored, read some books I didn't like quite as much, but they kind of balance each other out and you can't like every book. So it was a fun wrap up. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this wrap up. If you did, please do give this video a thumbs up. Comment down below how many books you read this month and subscribe to see more of my face on your feed. I've also got my Patreon link down below where we will be reading our book club pick, The Once and Future Witches, within October. It's also our September pick, but I think most of us have saved it for October because witches, but I'm really excited about that. There's also live shows, a podcast, lots of exciting things, so that is great. I'm very excited for content coming there soon. That's all linked down below as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep smiling and stay positive.